like
to start a question by actually going back over, talking a little bit about Chris in an introductory sense that I didn't do at the beginning, quite deliberately, because I wanted to start with this question. We've had Pine here for the first 2 years, Christopher Pine, and as South Australians, no matter what colour politics you support, we really have to congratulate that man for bringing to South Australia two incredible projects. And Chris, while he says he's not an engineer, he's certainly been instrumental in creating an environment for engineers to work in South Australia through his politics and his work in politics in the past. So I'd like to ask the question, how hard was it to bring these projects to South Australia when you were doing all that work? I mean, we're here now in the glory of looking back on what we've got to do to execute on those projects. Tell us how hard it was to actually make those projects happen here.
Oh, look, I think, John, it's a really good point to raise. I think we can't underestimate the impact that Christopher Pine had in terms of the defence industry and the work that was done in terms of laying the foundations for some of these really significant programs. I think the hard thing, and Christopher talks about this often as well, was not necessarily the location. It was getting that decision out of government and that commitment out of government that they wanted to build a continuous naval shipbuilding enterprise. That was really the key decision. When you look back, it's that we're not wanting to embark on a new ship program. It's not about building frigates. It's not about building submarines. What we want to do is about building an enduring capability. Once that decision was made, and that was the really key decision, then it just became a choice of design and capability and location. I think Adelaide was always really well placed for that because of the history that we have and the capability that's been built through the Collins Class program and also the AWD program. But yeah, I think it's been a really significant period of time, and it seems like much longer, but it's only really been 2 to 3 years in which a lot of these really key decisions have been made, and they're going to have lasting impacts for decades to come. So it's been really rewarding to be working through those processes. I'm obviously delighted that BAE Systems was selected for the frigate program, because I think that was the best capability. But as a South Australian, I'm more impressed and I'm more pleased that there's that legacy now that we're going to have decades of work and decades of meaningful, high-end, technology-driven jobs right here in Adelaide, so that my children and everyone's children are going to have that opportunity to stay here and work in rewarding careers well into the future. And I think that's the really pleasing thing about what's happened over the past few years.
What I'd like to say as a South Australian, very well done. I think we all should give this man a clap, because he has done a lot of work in politics himself. For how many years? How many years did you spend in politics before you went into BAE?
It seems like an age ago, John. That was I've been with BAE for 13 years, but yeah, I was in and around that sort of scene for probably 7 or 8 years before that.
And it's not to be underestimated. So do we have any other questions for Chris?
So Chris, with diversity in the workforce, and everybody's saying about having women, but currently still in higher education there's only 10 to 11% of women doing engineering and 20% doing IT. What have BAE got in their strategy to influence those future generations to pick STEM and defence?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's a really good question, and I think all of industry's trying to tackle this issue about diversity and how do we make sure we capture as much of that talent pipeline as we can. And a big part of that is making sure that we're attracting the broadest base of people into that pipeline. We have a real focus as a company at BAE Systems in terms of getting some increase in the numbers of female participation, particularly in technical disciplines and engineering disciplines. We do a lot of work in terms of sponsoring STEM programs that I mentioned in my remarks, but that's really about outreach and getting to people early and demonstrating what careers in these disciplines look like now, because I think there are some preconceptions around what a career in engineering looks like or what a career in shipbuilding looks like, but the reality is so much different now. And it's a real technology-driven industry. There's really exciting opportunities, and we need to get away from some of those gender stereotypes and some of those assumptions about what those technologies are. So it's a journey, we've obviously started on. We're not probably where we want to be, but there's a lot of effort and a lot of focus across the industry in making sure we're really trying to inspire young girls and females that career in STEM disciplines and careers in engineering are rewarding and worthy of being considered.
We have a young lady in the room, one of my scholars in the scholarship program, who's here today because she wants to work in the Defence Force, and she's in IT, so I should
She
introduce
should
you.
come and talk to me, because like I said, we need all of them.
Sitting right there.
Yeah, Chris, bit of talk in the news in the last few days about the AIC plan.
Yep.
Firstly, congratulations to BAE, because I think you've set the path ahead for other larger primes to follow in that regard. But we're seeing the OPVs and the submarines where perhaps we're not meeting the criteria, and the excuses that we don't have the capability. So how important is collaboration, business to business in that cycle of things?
Oh, it's critically important, and I think the other thing that's changed in the last few years is the size of the programs is so much bigger than they used to be. I remember when I first started, we went on a program that was $50 million. We'd be celebrating for a week. Now we're talking about programs that are tens of billions of dollars and are spanning for decades. So the reality is the programs now are much bigger than any one company can deliver. So the only way that we're collectively going to meet that challenge is if we work together, both industry and defence, but primes and SMEs as well. So we're going to have to make it work, because the primes can't deliver these programs on their own, and they're going to need to build a resilient and a well-resourced SME sector to help them deliver on some of these key programs. Now, from our perspective, we were in a fortunate position in many ways because we've been in country for longer than most companies. So we've got a history dating back 70 years in Australia, and we've always had the strategy of investing in local capability, long before it was fashionable. So we came into the C5000 program with a really well-established supply chain. We've got over 1,600 suppliers already in our supply chain. We spend about $360 million per annum within the Australian domestic supply chain. So we already had good relationships, and I think if you look at the history in terms of what we've been over, be it through the frigate program, we had a similar experience through Land 400, which we unfortunately didn't win, but it was good to continue to build those industry relationships, and also through John. So we've had some really big campaigns recently, and through each of those iterations, we've had to refine the way in which we're engaging with industry, which we're building that supply chain, making them aware of the opportunities and what they need to do also to come up that capability curve so they're ready to be supplying into those programs. So from a Hunter perspective, we've already done a number of industry roadshows. We've been to every state so far, Tasmania, everywhere. We've done 10 significant roadshows. We've already got 950 companies pre-qualified to supply into Hunter. Now we've just got to make sure that we continue that dialogue and make sure that we maximise the Australian content that we get through these programs. Yeah.
I have a question which is sort of based around supply chain and cyber security. So we've got BAE, Naval Group, big primes, essentially wanting to do the same thing with the supply chain, where you're each going to have your own systems to validate, security side of things and supply chain side of things. Are there opportunities to work together for commonality and cash saving?
Yeah, I definitely think there are, and I think we've been through the competitive process effectively for some of these major competitions, and I think what we're seeing now is a lot more collaboration between those key players because we've got a common goal and we've got common challenges we need to meet in terms of building the supply chain, but cyber is a really critical challenge, and it's one of the key things that keeps us all awake at night in terms of how do we make sure that we're not only cyber resilient, but we've got that cyber resilience through the entire supply chain. So I definitely think there are going to be opportunities where the primes can collaborate to make some of those engagements a lot easier and to make sure that we're not doubling up in terms of some of those activities, but making sure that the supply chain understands what some of those cyber challenges are really is one of those key areas of focus for all defence companies at the moment.
Other questions? Well, if that's all we have, I'd like you to put your hands together and say thank you very much to Chris. This is going to be one of the most Our second speaker today is from GHD. One of the things about these mega projects, shipbuilding included, is the transition from the old ways of doing things to the new ways of doing things. you'll hear discussions of concepts like digital twin, the digital shipyard, among other things. And this man on my left-hand side, Rohan from GHD, is going to talk a little bit about those concepts in being digital in meat projects. So the first thing
I was being difficult with the IT guys, so it's I was going to split this into two different parts. So I'm going to present with PowerPoint for a start, but I'm going to show you a couple of things of a couple of projects and how we found benefit out of using newer technology. But it's interesting with